We live in a world that is sometimes rather disappointing, isn't it? I mean, sometimes, like last night, it's fun. Sometimes everything goes right, everything works, no hitches, everything's the way it's supposed to be. And we love those moments. Those are moments that you just love them. You just like it when things work the way they're supposed to work. But we also live in a world that quite frequently doesn't work that way. All you have to do, turn on the news, open up your phone, get online. You're going to see lots of stories that make you scratch your head and go, what in the world is going on? That's usually my response anytime I open up my phone, because I don't watch the news. That's too depressing. If I read it, I can at least skip the stories I don't want to know about. But I sit there and read and I think, what's the world coming to? How did we get into the messes that we're in right now? When did chaos seem to take over? And as Christians, this often brings up a problem. And the problem is, we believe we worship a God, that we have a God, that there is a creator that is above all. That his authority, his power is above everything. And that everything in the world, everything in the universe, everything in creation answers to him. But if that is the case, how did we get so messed up? You know, when you watch the news, when you look at what's going on, when you see what's happening, sometimes it gets depressing, doesn't it? Because it feels like there's nothing you can do about it. You know, we're we're way into a political season here in the U.S. And I'm not going to say one candidate or another or any of that. All I'm going to say is yuck. How do we get to where we get? What's going to happen next? I remember when I first got old enough to vote and actually started paying attention to politics, and I would watch how elections go. There were sometimes I would think, oh my goodness, we're not going to be here 4 years from now. This just went horribly wrong. It doesn't actually work that way, does it? And part of the reason is we're not the ones in control. We're not the ones with the final say. We have a God who has the final say. But again, the problem for us as Christians is when we see everything go sideways, we start asking, where's God? Where's God in all this? If God is sovereign, if God is above all, if God is more powerful than anything and everything that happens, why is he letting this happen? Well, this morning we're going to start looking at that a little bit. We're going to look at it a little bit this week, a little bit next week. This morning, turn over to the book of Habakkuk. It's in the Old Testament. It's one of those little prophets. They call them minor prophets. There's nothing minor about them except their size. They're short. You can read them really quick. But Habakkuk was a prophet that lived in a very difficult time. As Habakkuk lived, he looked at his politicians, his kings, his rulers, all the people that was in charge, and they were corrupt. They were bad. They were terrible, in fact. And they had been so bad for so long that God had been warning for a long time, I'm about to react to this. I'm about to take care of this. Now, granted, God had been promising that for centuries. And the people had become rather complacent. I guess they thought, because God had been waiting centuries, that God wasn't going to act. But in Habakkuk's time, something started to change. There were new powers to contend with. For years and years, for centuries, Israel had lived in fear of the nation of Assyria. Right? Modern day Turkey, basically. And Assyria had been a major power. They had raided Israel frequently. Israel had to pay tribute and taxes and everything to Assyria. And they didn't like Assyria. They wanted Assyria to be gone. The whole book of Jonah is about how God wanted to say something to Assyria, and Jonah didn't want to say it because he hated that place. But in Habakkuk's lifetime, Assyria fell. A king from another land marched in and destroyed the power nobody thought could be beat. That king's name was Nebuchadnezzar, and his kingdom was Babylon. And up to this point, Babylon hadn't been anybody. They had been this small kingdom, this small place off to the east. But all of a sudden, under Nebuchadnezzar, power started to fall. Not only did he defeat Assyria, he took the Egyptians, that oldest, most ancient kingdom, and he destroyed them as well. And then he turned his eyes to Israel. And he knew Israel had wealth. He knew Israel had gold. Why? Because good King Hezekiah had made a very bad choice in showing Babylon his treasures to Nebuchadnezzar's father and grandfather. So Nebuchadnezzar turned south and he's headed towards Israel. And the Babylonian army was unlike any army the world had ever seen. Nobody could stand against Babylon. They destroyed whatever kingdom they wanted to destroy. They killed whoever they wanted to kill. They took whatever they wanted to take. And Habakkuk looks at it and he complains to God. It's like Habakkuk standing on the walls of Jerusalem and he sees this ocean of humanity that is the Babylonian army, and it's surging towards Israel. And Habakkuk starts to cry out, God, why? Why would you let something like this happen? And God answers him. In Habakkuk chapter 1, let's read verses 1 through 11. This is Habakkuk calling out to God. This is the prophecy that Habakkuk the prophet received. How long, Lord, must I call out for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. Their strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted. That's a pretty fair complaint, isn't it? God, why is everything going wrong? Why do bad guys seem to win? Why does evil seem to conquer the good? But here's God's response. He speaks to Habakkuk and he says, look at the nations. Watch what's happening, Habakkuk, and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you're told. And here's the shocker. I am raising up the Babylonians. That ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings that are not their own. They are feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves. They promote their own honor. Their horses are swifter than leopards, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallop headlong. The horsemen come from afar. They fly like eagles swooping to devour. They all come intent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. They mock kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at all fortified cities. They build earthen ramps to capture them. They sweep past like the wind and go on. Guilty people whose strength is their God. Here's God's summary of the Babylonians. These people worship themselves. They conquer, they kill, they destroy. And the only thing they respect is their own power. The problem was, God said, and I'm the one bringing them to you. Now, did the Babylonians know God? Not at all. Now, before his death, Nebuchadnezzar would learn of God. Nebuchadnezzar would come face to face with God's power. Nebuchadnezzar would be humbled to the point that there's actually a passage in the book of Daniel written by King Nebuchadnezzar praising the God of Israel. But at this point, he didn't know God. The Babylonians don't think they're serving God. They don't know they have anything to do with the God of Israel. Yet God turns to Habakkuk and he says, Habakkuk, what you're complaining about is what I'm doing. He was fulfilling the promises he had made to Nebuchadnezzar's predecessors, or to Habakkuk's predecessors. They were about to pay for their sins, and he was going to use this pagan nation to take care of it. Here's the thing about our God. God is over everything, even when we can't tell. God is the one in control at the highest level. Now, don't misunderstand me, and we're going to get into this more next week. Does that mean everything that happens is God's will? Shake your head like this. Go ahead and do it, because the answer is no. All right? We violate God's will all the time. He made us free moral agents. He gave us the ability to choose, and with that ability, we can choose badly. And God never, ever wants us to choose badly. But in the end, we answer to Him. In the end, every choice, every decision will be brought before Him. He is the ultimate authority. He is ultimately the one in charge. He's the one everybody answers to. In chapter 2 of Habakkuk, God spells that out for us. Habakkuk hears the first response and says, okay, I get it, God. You're in control. But I don't understand how you could let wicked people defeat people who at least aren't as bad as they are. Of course, God doesn't do comparative morality. He doesn't say, well, you're better than this person or this person's better than that person. God has His standard and we all give an account to Him. He doesn't judge us based on each other. He judges us based on who we are. But Habakkuk's struggling. But he says, okay, you know what? I'm going to set myself up on the wall. I'm going to watch. I'm going to prepare myself so that when God speaks, I'll be ready to listen. Here's what God says. Habakkuk chapter 2. I'm going to start in verse 2. The Lord replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets, that the herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks to the end. It will not prove false. Though it lingers, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. See, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright. But the righteous person will live by his faithfulness. Indeed, wine betrays him. He is arrogant and never at rest, because he is as greedy as the grave. And like death, he's never satisfied. He gathers to himself all the nations and takes captive all the peoples. Will not all of them taunt him with ridicule and scorn him, saying, woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion? How long must this go on? Will not your creditors suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you will become their prey. Because you have plundered many nations, the people who left will plunder you, for you have shed human blood. You have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Woe to him who builds his house by unjust gain, setting his nest on high to escape the clutches of ruin. You have plotted the ruin of many people, shaming your own house and fortifying your life. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and establishes a town by injustice. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire? That the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it from the wineskin till they are drunk, so that he can gaze on their naked bodies. You will be filled with shame instead of glory. Now it is your turn. Drink and let your nakedness be exposed. The cup from the Lord's right hand is coming to you, and disgrace will cover your glory. The violence you have done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, and your destruction of animals will terrify you. For you have shed human blood, and you have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Pause there. What's God talking about? He's looking at Babylon and he's saying, I've seen what you've done. Now, like I said, he's the one bringing them. He's the one that has a mission for Babylon to accomplish, but that doesn't excuse Babylon. For every atrocity they commit, they're still going to answer to God. For every violence they perpetrate upon people, they'll answer to their Creator. For everything they steal, for everything they hoard, for everything they do that is evil, they're still going to answer to God. You see, this is where God's sovereignty is actually truly found. It's not that He controls the little things. A lot of the little things He leaves to our decisions. But it's that ultimately everything comes back to Him. At the beginning of that passage, He told Habakkuk, He said, take this vision and I want you to write it really clear. Actually, I want you to write it so that the herald that's going to give this message to the people can run and relay the message at the same time. It's short, it's sweet, it's to the point. And his message was basically this: I will accomplish what I have set out to accomplish. My arrow will not miss the mark. What I say I'm going to do, that purpose I will fulfill. God can't be stopped. This is the other part of God's sovereignty. His will ultimately be done. And nobody can stop it. Nobody can keep it from happening. Nobody, when God decides something must happen, there is no power in all the universe that can keep that from happening. But here's the question. What is God's purpose? If God is set to fulfill that purpose in His sovereignty, in His power, what is that purpose? All through Scripture, it gets echoed again and again and again. Because God actually only has one purpose in this world. From the time He created it to the time He will end it, His purpose is singular. One thing. One thing and only one thing. Anybody want to guess what it is? He wants to save His children. He wants to claim His children. And who are His children? We are. You are. Every human being who ever has lived is a child of God. God's creation. And God wants more than anything to claim us as His own. We are His most precious thing. Now, I don't know if y'all noticed this morning, but I got extra jewelry on. Anybody else notice that? I know if you were asleep, because how do you miss it, really? It's gorgeous. I was given this morning by a very special young lady because I was whining that I did not get enough candy last night. So she gave me this ring. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit me real well, so I'll probably give it back after services. But you know, we have things that are precious to us, right? Things that mean a lot to us, things that we value. There's only one thing in all of creation God actually values. And it's you. It's us. It's His children. And God is doing whatever it takes, whenever He needs to, whatever has to be done to gain His children. Now, when we look at the world and we see craziness and stupidity and violence and sin and evil and all this other stuff, we may for a moment want to say, well, where's God? God is where He has always been, doing what He has always done. And because we know that, we don't have to fear. We don't have to fear what comes next. It doesn't matter what violent people do. It doesn't matter what evil people do. There is nobody in the world that can stop our God from accomplishing His purpose. And if we accept His purpose, then we have nothing to fear. What are they going to do? Kill us? I mean, that doesn't sound pleasant, but it also doesn't scare me. It shouldn't scare me. Kill the body, He has the soul. And He's promised to resurrect the body. We gain victory in life. We gain victory in death. We gain victory in the life to come because God's purpose will be fulfilled. And He is sovereign, and He is powerful, and He is the one in control. So whatever the world looks like, you can have hope. Whatever happens, you can rejoice. We don't have to wait for the good times. We can do it in the bad times. Because we know there's somebody in charge far above all of this mess. Just don't confuse God's patience with approval. We'll talk about this next week, right? This is a little teaser to get us to next Sunday if God gives us next Sunday. Because He's sovereign. It's His choice whether we get it or not. When God is patient in this world, when He allows evil to exist, when He allows things to happen, don't take that as God's approval. Just like with the Babylonians, God didn't approve of their methods. He's sovereign. He's king. He'll use them. That doesn't mean He approves of them. And it doesn't mean they won't give an account. Even if God is being patient in your life right now because you're not living as a child of God and being the person God's called you to be, don't mistake His patience with approval. If you're here this morning, hopefully you know the kind of person God has called you to be. He's called you to be like Jesus. He's called you to be righteous. He's called you to be holy. Actually, He's called you to be like Him. To be a person of love and grace and mercy and generosity and all those other qualities that we love about God. And don't wait for His patience to end. Because one day it will. In His sovereignty, in His power, He said, one day it will finally stop. Don't know when that day will be. Just be ready for it. Then you don't have to fear it.